So thank you, Bill. This is Bill Crouse, retired chairman of Crouse and Associates. And Bill and I have been together, working together for 25 years now. And so here are some questions with the objective, what I want to share for the business executives and the entrepreneurs, the future business executives, to talk about how to build the IT outsourcing relationship with the vendor. Because that's exactly what we have done in Netswitch with Bill and Crouse and Associates for the last 25 years, 22 within Netswitch, and a few years prior to that when I was working for a billion-dollar telephone company. So we're going to talk about these two objectives.
Before we dive into our discussion, Bill, with great pleasure, allow me to provide the background information about Crouse and Associates to our audience. Crouse and Associates is a large independent wholesaler broker established in 1975 and licensed in every state. Our most valued relationship is with our retail and carrier partners because of that we work harder and smarter than anyone in the business to make sure you look good. Our team approach allows us to think differently, which makes us stronger and better able to attack any challenges in placing E&S business. We are proud to have an amazing line of over 300 markets for your property casualty, financial services, transportation, and umbrella accounts.
And Bill, we have been working for over 25 years, and we share similar value, philosophies, and thoughts. So let's bring our audience back into early stage. I was a sales engineer for this telecom company, and that's where I met you in San Francisco. And we start selling the telephone system that you had.
Right.
So the first question I have, which is, I have been wondering all these years, from a big company that I work with you to my startup a few years later in Netswitch in the year 2000, why would you take such a big risk working from a large company into a startup company when we only have 3 people?
Well, you have to understand that at that time, in the development of any corporation in America, there was no IT as such. Accounting systems were all done by pencil and paper. And we, at that point in time, decided that we wanted to convert our accounting system over to a computer. And we originally started working with a firm in Sebastopol, California. And that relationship became very difficult because of the distance. So we wanted to get somebody that we could work with closer by. And at that time, Stanley, who was working with the Williams company and the telephone company, we had installed their telephone system in our company, had indicated that he wanted to leave Williams and he wanted to start an internet or a computer company. So we thought, well, at least ways we could work with Stanley and we could tell him what we wanted and how we wanted it done. And we started working with Stanley to develop a software system for our accounting department. And over the period of about 6 months, we developed a fairly decent workable program. And at that point in time, there were no computers really at each individual's desk. We only had one computer at that time, and then we developed 2 or 3 additional computers that were networked together. And that was the first time that I know of that a computer system was networked together. And Stanley did that, and we were able to work with him and have control over what was happening, as opposed to working with some large multinational $1 million company. Because with those companies like Williams, you have no control. But with Stanley, we had control, and so we wanted the control, and that system worked. And as it progressed, we then decided that we had to put computers on everybody's desk and network the whole system. And we did that, but we had to send everybody to computer school so that they would learn how to use the system. And then it developed from there. What Stanley did then was he followed suit. He started hiring some people, And there had some very intelligent young people that came with him at that time. I don't remember their names now. This has been too many years since. But anyway, that's how it got started, and that's why we worked with Stanley, was because we felt that we had control over him, whereas we wouldn't have control with a large multinational corporation.
Right, that personal touch.
The personal touch, right?
And also, I remember, Bill, you asked me, for my home phone number. Of course, back then we didn't have cell phone.
Right. And you wouldn't give me the phone number.
That's right. And I didn't need to. So now that first, I got to go back. Congratulations that you, as in every entrepreneur's dream, that you started a company and had a very successful career. Of course, there's always up and down. And now your company has merged and joined force with another large insurance company. So it's kind of like ending this chapter, and which is, for me, it's a big part of the whole journey that you can able to exit, so to speak. With today's language, you're exiting the business.
That's true.
So now that going back into so many years ago for our business leaders and the future business leaders, can you walk us through how do you feel starting your own company and meeting all those challenges up and down? And one part of it is, of course, that you have your personal side, the family side, which is always a challenge. It's still a challenge for me. How do you manage that?
That's a difficult question to answer because I don't really know. I started this company actually in 1972. I left Marsh & McLennan, which was a large national insurance brokerage firm, and went across the street and at the direction of one of their officers and opened an office that he said had not been done in San Francisco since the 30s, and that was to start a wholesale insurance brokerage operation. And he said that if I did that he would make sure that Marsh & McLennan supported me. So I went across the street, rented an office, and hired a girl, and we had a typewriter, we had a telex machine, and 2 telephones, and we started business at April of 1972. And about the January of 75, we had grown to the point where we had hired 2 or 3 other producers in the office. We had hired 3 other people in our accounting department, and we had hired a young lady to answer the telephone. And at that point in time, we needed to refinance the company in order to grow further. So we refinanced the company, and we started over scratch with Crouse. It was originally Crouse Norman and Associates, and then eventually Henry Norman, who was one of the investors, decided that he wanted to retire, and we bought his stock back and changed the name of the company to Crouse and Associates, as it is today. And that going forward, we developed new companies, new technologies, and whatever, and we were able to attract a lot of people from major insurance brokerage firms around San Francisco and California area because we had unique services, okay? And went from there. We were one of the first companies to ever put together a multi-marine, ocean marine, wet marine, and domestic insurance coverage for the Alexander Baldwin Corporation, which had sugarcane fields and ships and cargo and stevedores and all that. We put all that together in a package policy. And that was really the beginning of doing a lot more things in the insurance brokerage business. But then we needed to have an accounting system that would allow us to do that. And that's where Stanley came in, because we had already started with Stanley as a earlier.
Telecom, yeah, in the telecom side.
Right, on the telecom side. So we decided that we were having some issues with the company that we were using in Sebastopol, and this was the opportunity to bring Stanley in And since he had the knowledge that we thought would be necessary for us to go forward, we helped him get a start. He could establish a company, and which he did, which is now called Netswitch, and which is now a multinational company because they have operations throughout the world.
Well, let's go back into your expertise. Okay, so I think that the main important thing is what I hear so far. You manage a lot of risk, and of course, as an insurance company, you have to manage risk.
Yes, you have to manage the risk.
You have to manage the risk,
Right.
and then even hiring a new company, outsource vendor like ourselves, you have to manage that risk.
We had to manage that as well, right?
But for 22 years that our relationship, how would you sum it up in a simple way with relationship with risk management?
Progressive, really. They started out very small, and they grew and it grew, and we managed it as it grew. And Stanley, you helped manage it as it grew. You hired some really good people, and so until today, so it's like climbing stairs. You start at the bottom and you climb up, and as you go up each step, there's new challenges and new things that you have to overcome. And you were able to do that for us. And
But why would you even trust a startup company versus, and you had, your business was growing, you have the financial capability to hire big company to do this part. And we talked about earlier that you said control, but it's a big leap of faith to trust a small company. When I started with $1 billion company, and of course you can have them to do whatever you want with your financial capability, but you still choose to risk your business to a smaller vendor.
yes, the reason for that is, of course, it's control. We felt that with the relationship that we had with you, since we knew you, that we had more control over what was going to happen and how it happened, and we had a open line of communication so that we could discuss problems and work out solutions. And we felt that that was a critical importance to us in developing going forward.
So in this control, were you running into anything that was surprise to you or anything that concerns you?
Every day. This is such a
But you're still able to control and manage this concern and just continue to work with us.
We thought so.
Okay.
But as any businessman will tell you, you think you have control, but you really don't. Because
Right. That's right. There's
okay?
always surprises in
There's always
business.
There's always a surprise waiting for you around the corner. Yes.
Yes, and then that's another part. How do you manage that with your management team? Because you are one of the business person that, one of the few that I met that really opened up the communication with your team from top to bottom. And you insist that they sit into this IT meeting like your accounting team to make sure they get the feedback to us so we can do our job, which we really appreciate it, because rather than shooting in the dark, we know exactly what was going forward, what they need, how to fix the problem. But you open up that communication for us to continue to march on. I know that, of course, that you had to control and monitor all the time. So we keep saying that, checking the pulse, assessing the situation, and react according to that.
Yeah. What we did, and to answer your question, was in the early stages of development of this relationship, we had meetings every Tuesday morning with everybody in the company at that time, including accounting people, our production people, and whatever, and support staff, and discussed issues that each of those people were facing, and discussed methodologies for solving those problems. It wasn't just me. It was the group. It was the team, as you would call it. We didn't call them teams in those days. We just called them support people, right? So we'd have these meetings on Tuesday morning, and they would bring up the issues that we were faced with. What was happening with this? What was happening with that? What was with this? And we would try to resolve those issues. If we would get the people in, like Stanley here on our IT staff, and bring them and try to get those issues resolved. And as the time went on, that we built and built and built and built up until where it became a very complex system as it is today. Okay, it's very, very complex, and it takes really highly trained people to understand that.
Right.
And it's beyond my ability now at this advanced stage to understand all that. But Stanley here,
Well, one part we did talk about in the early stage, you and I collaborate a lot, and eventually you have a new CEO. Basically, you let the new CEO run, so you can start going on your semi-retirement. But at the same time, I said you're my idol because you keep involved with the business, even up to today at your age. That you're still involved with the business.
yeah, at that time, when we were trying to resolve all of these issues, there was a young lady which we hired to really work in an office that we had in Walnut Creek, California, and we found out that her father was a computer guy, so we brought her into the San Francisco office. Her name was Pam Colisi, which she was very interested in computers and with computer technology and their software programs. And she helped us to do several things. For instance, we were one of the first companies that went paperless because we were able to get all that paper stuff into a computer system and be able to retrieve it and use it and go from there. So she was very instrumental in the ability of our being able to go paperless. Okay, that was a really major step for us to do, and so we would do that. That was step number 2 actually, but step number 1 was getting the computers into the office. Step number 2 was getting people to use the computers and then get our paper files into a system that we could use using Stanley's computer systems. So there we went from there.
Which brings up a very good point. Again, that you're willing to risk, and you must, you have the vision, and you have the strategy, but you're still willing to take the risk despite it. Nobody have done it before,
Right.
And now, 20 years later or 15 years later, do you think that it pays off in a big way,
Absolutely.
minimal way? Okay.
Absolutely.
So it was a cost justification, or was it more of that you believe that you need the efficiency to go paperless, to go, computer network and all of that IT?
Absolutely. It was efficiency that would allow us to have more time to work on our production of insurance contracts than we would have otherwise had to be able to do. If we were still doing our accounting system by finishing a pencil on a piece of paper, we would never have been able to get to where we were. Okay, we had to get our accounting system into a computer system, and then since we were able to do that and became very efficient at it, we were able then to expand it further and to bring it in and go paperless in our company and get everything into the system. And it's still there, and it's still being progressive today. We're still expanding. I think that.
And I think that you, besides that, in 2008, that's like 14 years ago, you posed a question to me, what do I think about cloud? Cloud infrastructure.
Yeah, cloud, yeah.
And when most of the IT people haven't even heard about cloud. But you are such a visionary, and you are no IT background. You trust your team, including outsourced vendor like Netswitch and myself to do it.
Right.
And you oversee the whole transition period from old technology, if I may, to the new IT systems and the whole everything about IT. Right. And then going into something that in the cloud, even though you are already semi-retired, if I may, being more in the strategic position as a chairman of the company.
Right.
What brings you to those type of topic and willing to take those risks?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that the paper and the data storage that the system was developing, and somehow, in the legalities of what we are required to do by the national and the statewide insurance what do you call them, bureaucracy, okay, the state bureaucracy of insurance, They wanted you to do certain things and to have certain things available, but they wanted them to have it available for like 5 or 6 or 7 years, okay? And so if you're accumulating all this information on a yearly basis, accumulating it on a 7-year basis, it becomes astronomical. It becomes mind-boggling. So when I heard about the cloud and what the cloud could do, the first thing I did was ask Stanley, what the hell is cloud and how does it work? And how,
And you asked me, was it safe? That was very early stage. Yeah, is it safe? And I told you, I don't think it's safe at that point.
yeah, that's true. So I don't know where it is now.
Oh, yes, today is completely different.
Yeah.
And actually, so a few years back, we converted everything at Crouse at the IT infrastructure into cloud. And actually, because of your company keep growing, the number doesn't justify it anymore. So we actually going into the hybrid cloud. That was this year's plan.
Right.
But of course, the merge in the joint force together. So we're going to put that on hold for now. So we went from a private to cloud infrastructure, and now it's supposed to go into the hybrid mode.
I don't know.
For the cost of certificate. Of course, but you were at that point, I was surprised that you asked me that question because you're not in IT at all, but you still kept involved, kept educating yourself with all this new technology. And you asked me whether it's safe, and we were already into the cybersecurity. In fact, that we helped Crouse and Associate making sure that, to complete the self-attestations into cyber risk and managing cyber risk in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And so all of these, you have started this strategy.
You have to understand that back in those times, okay, there was no risk, and because but nobody was getting into other people's systems, okay.
True. Very true.
There was no threat.
But you were willing to. You were visionary enough to ask those questions. That's what I was surprised.
Yeah, but then as things progressed, we began to realize that we were vulnerable. That we were exposed because anybody who wanted to, and at that point in time was whenever you mentioned to me the other night about my sending business to China and having a China company do work for us, okay?
Yeah,
and to trust them to do the work efficiently and to be safe, okay? We wanted it to be safe, okay?
Yes.
And so we needed to do something with that to make sure that the relationship was safe, not only for that relationship, but for our own relationships within the United States.
Yes, it was a big thing when I started. So I was shocked that even though it was only a couple people, but you were willing to, basically go on, and it was a sensitive time too, start sending some of the background work and back-end work into China. But of course that we have to make sure that it's all protected through multi-layers of technologies. And yes, I was sweating. As a matter of fact, even though I travel there all the time, but I was still sweating because you want to make sure that everything is protected according to the regulation. And
at the same time, the young fellow who was started Netswitch was telling me that he had just got a contract with Peninsula Hotel in Kowloon, Hong Kong area to do their national booking.
Oh, global.
And I said,
more than cybersecurity.
In the wait a minute.
But again, it's the risk and how you balance it, right? And what you said is how you control and mitigate the risk and making sure that you have the right balance, because we can't just sit in our comfort zone forever and without going outside to start breaking some,
I just want to say one thing about that. When Stanley told me about his relationship with Peninsula Hotel in Kowloon, I knew then that he had a relationship in China, and we were able to do some business with people who were in China who could do things for us on policy issuing basis. And we ran into a company, I forget what the name of the town was, but it's where they are. But we still do business. Isaiah and Stan, we're still doing business with them, right?
Ames?
Yeah.
Ames? Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have, And then, of course, that is history because we already replaced that. with a software as a service company.
Yeah.
And we have been doing the migration, and it's been going so smoothly. But it did some, nothing is 100% smooth. So always have some bumpy ride, but we were able to manage it and
But
get
this
over
is
it.
you're going back to 1972, 1975, and going forward. It's the progression of things that we did over those
like it.
years that allowed us to get to this point where we are right now.
Yes.
And eventually, Stanley here is going to have a conversation with a young lady named Pam Kulisi, who is our chief operating officer of the company today. But Pam is a computer freak. I mean, she has no background, no training, no experience.
But she loves to get her hands into it. Yeah.
But she has acquired the knowledge on her own. And she is very efficient at doing what she does.
Right.
And it'll be a good interview that you'll have with
Yes,
her.
of course. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But I can remember the day that I hired her, and she was working in our small little office in Walnut Creek, and we decided to bring her to San Francisco.
But what I admire you, Bill, was that you had the courage and also taking the effort, your own effort, away from your family time, your personal time, to sink it into something that is not your core business. Your core business is insurance brokerage. Your core business is not IT, but you still spend so much effort into trying to understand, and so you can control and making the progressions as we go.
Yeah. And so we were able to grow the company in the same time.
And all in the name of efficiency.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what we have done. And I took Crouse and Associate and turn it into the 4 categories and how do you manage costs or cost justifications. And the first part we talk about, is the IT solution generating revenue? If it is, that would be the primary choice, revenue generations. And then revenue efficiency, can it be cutting costs and making more efficiency to generate revenue? And then it goes into the management side. And eventually, in the last category is something that, does it make any efficiency impact? If it doesn't, maybe we can dump it and start over with a new system. And that's actually what I have learned over the years working with Crouse. And your vision had allowed me and allowed Netswitch to keep growing and just keep learning as we go, and which is fascinating.
Right.
And I hope this is, the interview that people can learn something out of it. And I think this is the key part, that how we can manage the progression, like you said, which is a valuable term, and controlling the risk, but at the same time, not to shy away to learn new things, right?
Yeah.
How would you conclude this interview, if you may?
I would like to just say one thing. At the time that I started the new progression in 1975, there were no other wholesale insurance brokers in San Francisco. Within 2 years, there were 12 guys that had left their companies and started a business. And most of them failed because they didn't have the internal fortitude or the internal knowledge to expand and do the things that we were doing with Netswitch. Before Netswitch, with the software company that we adopted up in Sebastopol. As that system didn't do what we wanted it to do in the future, we needed to expand it somehow or another. And in that same time frame, all but 2 of those companies went bankrupt. None of them survived except two other ones.
Wow.
And so of those 2 others that survived, both of them have sold within the last 5 years and left us alone. We were the only sole survivor of that whole group of people.
Wow.
Until this year.
Wow.
And now this year, the Crouse and Associates no longer survives. It's now a part of Ryan's Specialty Corporation National, big, large
As an
national.
entrepreneur, that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to retire with multi-million dollars.
Thank you very much, Bill, for your time today to share your valuable experience with our audience. And we hope they can benefit from your successful venture to grow their companies. Thanks again for your time.